Today's session is an introduction to the Irwin EABP repository. As we start talking about the repository and everything that makes it up, all the building blocks, this is a diagram that represents its core meta model. So at the very middle of this core meta model is an object, but right above an object is a model. So we're going to start with a model. And a model within the CW Modeler repository is a container of all the objects and artifacts that make up its architecture. So a model is kind of synonymous with an encyclopedia or a mini repository in its own right. The model itself contains objects. Objects are the information entities that make up the architecture, such as activities, systems, processes, roles, technologies, databases, data stores, things like that. So everything captured in the model is an instance of an object. All the objects have properties. So a property is a data element that defines the information that can be captured for any given object. There's a defined list of property types, such as checkboxes, drop-down lists, whole numbers, dates, etc. And properties are generally organized by panes. So a pane is a tab that allows you to organize the information in a meaningful way. Category is a property on all objects that's used to subtype or categorize all the objects in the model. One of the special things that categories can do is make things look different on diagrams. An association is a type of object that joins two objects together. So for instance, if you take a process and drag it into a swim lane for an organization, or take an application, drag it into a technology swim lane, or a nested diagram, so it's a box-in-box diagram, the association that's created is actually creating a special intersection object. All objects that are created in CW Modeler have a true logical many-to-many relationship. A diagram is something that's really special. So it's a special object type that captures the visual or graphical representation of the object and their associations. You can see objects are displayed on diagrams, but diagram is a type of object. So diagrams themselves have properties as well. One of the properties a diagram has is a category, and a category is something that makes things look different. So you can actually have the same diagram and a diagram template. So a template is an instance of an object that's used to create more of those objects. So you can have diagram templates that have different categories to subtype or define them. And then the last thing on this page is a diagram rule. And a diagram rule is a set of consistency checks that can be applied to a given diagram. So a diagram defined or governed is always treated differently based on the type of diagram rule that it has. So a diagram rule will define or govern a diagram. Model Explorer is part of the CW suite that allows us to navigate through the repository. So every repository generally has multiple models. Even when you just first install the tool or you're using it in the cloud, wherever you are, you'll have at least a couple of models. So there'll be a template model and a regular model. So you can open up Model Explorer to be able to navigate through the models and be able to see what kind of things you can do here. There are different views. There's the object view as well as administration and design. The object view is used to look at your object similar to Object Explorer. It allows you to look at all the objects, their properties, their associations, while the administration view is a place where you manage your users and access rights, and the design is a place where you manage the meta model. Some of the things you can do in here is create new models, import, export from XML or MDB, as well as lock and delete models. So in order to delete a model, you have to lock it. On the left, you see the panel of options. So depending on which view you're in, that object view will change. That panel on the left will change. In the middle, you have the model tree, and on the right, you have your instance lists, whether it's an instance of an object type or an object instance or a list of your models, depending on where you are in the tree. So as we mentioned, all objects have properties, and all properties are organized by panes. So as you're looking at this, name is a property, alternate name is a property. These are all panes, general, description, objective, etc. Those are panes. And they can be of different types. So property types can be things like a drop-down list, such as this, or a single-line text, or multi-line text, or a drop-down. Category is a very special type of property. It is a drop-down, and what it does is it allows you to subtype objects. The category is used to make things look different on diagrams, and because of that, it can be locked. So you have a choice. You can always lock the category, in which case this edit button won't be present, or you can leave it open, and that's something you can do at the model level. You don't have to do them one by one. Model Explorer is category aware. So when you're looking at your list of objects, in this case, we're looking at processes. So we can tell this is a list of processes. These are the names of the processes and their categories. We can actually filter out objects that are of a specific category. So you always have that option at the very top of your list to choose only to show processes of, for instance, activity category or business process, etc. On a diagram, CW Modeler is category aware. So here we have one object type. It's an organization, and there are 4 different ways to represent it based on the category. So the categories are organization, department, functional area, and role. And you can see that by defining them differently on the palette, when you drag them out onto the diagram, they will look different. So that is a power, a choice you always have when you define categories of objects. Diagrams are a type of object in the model, and they have unique properties and behavior. So what's special about diagrams is that they allow you to have a visual representation of the object in a model. So to view a diagram in here, you can double-click from the list, and that will open up the diagram for you, and it will be opened up in CW Modeler. Diagrams are also category aware, so this is one place where you will most likely use categories all the time, even if you're not sub-categorizing things like applications or technologies. You will most likely sub-categorize diagrams, and this will be a really easy and useful way for you to manage your content. And we highly recommend that you do that, and all the sample models that ship with the product will have categories of diagrams. All diagrams have properties, so because diagrams are a type of object, they also have properties that define them. So you will always have a name, you'll have a diagram rule, so the rule defines what kind of things can be done with a diagram. The category really defines the set of things that are on your palette, so on your template. So if you decide to have an application landscape diagram, that's the category you give it. And you should always have a one-to-one relationship for every template that you have and category. So you shouldn't have a template called application landscape diagram if you don't have that category. They should always be one-to-one relationship for them. You also can have a parent object. So if you recall from an earlier session when we talked about drill downs, when you create a drill down or create the subsequent drill up, this is the parent object that is set for your child diagram. And there are a few other options in here as well, such as the title. So the title is something that's used in your Evolve web platform, for instance. So Irwin EA BP server, the title is used in order to display the name of the diagram. So that's also really, really important. So to summarize what we covered in this module is the fact that models are containers of all objects and artifacts that make up an architecture. So a model in CW Modeler is synonymous with encyclopedias in other tools. It's like a mini repository. A model contains objects. Objects have properties. Properties are organized by panes. A category is a special type of property that allows you to categorize or subtype objects, including diagrams. An association lets you relate things to one another, and diagrams are ruled by diagram rules. So a diagram rule is something that sets the consistency checks for a diagram, as well as the types of things that can be done on that diagram and the type of relationships that can be made on that diagram. And templates are an instance of objects used to create objects of that type, and diagram templates are probably the most common type of template you will use within Irwin EA BP. Thank you so much for your attention.